Hey everybody, welcome back. Today we're going to be doing our product review for the Revolution R270 Smart Toaster. Can a toaster really be worth $400? Well, we're about to find out. So you ready? Let's get into this. Just a quick note, our reviews are based upon the things that we think are important. That might be a little bit different for you, so what we recommend doing is after watching our video, you pull up a couple of different videos from other YouTube content creators. That way you can get a wider range of concerns and opinions, and you'll be able to make a much more informed buying decision. And that is the most important thing of all. This is the Revolution R270 Smart Toaster. The first thing you notice about this is there's no lever on it anywhere to get the bread down into the machine. That's because everything is handled through a touch screen. In fact, the only thing mechanical on this thing at all is the crumb tray down here. And the good thing about that is it can come completely out of the machine like that, and you can see I got some crumbs in here that I left in just for you. One thing about this crumb tray, it is not flimsy, I guess, but really the point of failure on this is just kind of right up here at the top. And I'm thinking if you got this stuck on something, you could bend that right off, but I don't know, it seems pretty solid. So I guess it's not really that big a deal, but maybe if these clips were made of metal or something? I don't know, maybe I'm just being paranoid. As far as this crumb tray goes, the machine will remind you once in a while to empty that. That's kind of a cool feature because a lot of times you don't and you end up with God knows what down there. The only control you have on this machine is the screen itself, because that is a touch screen. When you're on your screen, you can see 5 different options for different things you can toast, along with what it's called. For instance, you got a frosted pastry, which is a Pop-Tart, which is right there. Right there is for the warming rack, which we'll talk about later. And you got sourdough bread, wheat bread. Down below you have an arrow here because we have 2 separate sets of this bread. Right here it's on the panini setting, which we'll talk about later as well. And you got waffles, bagels, English muffins, so on and so forth. Going down below that, you have the option to select either fresh, frozen, or reheat. Speaking of that, you have darkness settings, 1 being the lightest and 7 being the darkest. And whatever type of bread you have selected up here will show graphically what that's kind of going to look like. See, 7 looks like a burnt mess, and 1 basically looks like raw bread for the most part. And if we go through these options, you can see it get a little bit darker for each number that we go up. Once you've selected what you want and have all your options set, then all you gotta do is hit the start button right here, and it'll automatically suck it down in the machine, toast it, and release it whenever it's ready. The only other option you have on the main screen is the gluten-free switch. So if I were to click that, then that would mean it would be wheat bread, but gluten-free wheat bread, as you can see by the little graphic right there. If we go into our options menu, you have the option to turn the date and time on and off whenever you walk away from the machine or haven't touched it for about a minute or so. You have volume controls down below. I've got mine set all the way up, or you can make it low, medium, or high on your sound. Down below here is the brightness control. I got it set on the lowest brightness, and that's just to do this video, because if I have it on anything higher, you're going to see that it gets super washed out and you can't see it on my camera. The way it looks to my eye though is really, really great, but you at home aren't going to be able to see it at all that way. So for this review, we're just leaving it on that lowest brightness setting. The only other option here is the selection preference, and that's the first little thing that I found kind of weird about this machine. Remember when I was on the main screen we had 2 different pages of options? Well, here they are right here. Page 1, we got the waffle, the English muffin, the regular bread, bagels, and the panini thing. And then on page 2, we had the warming rack, the sourdough, the multigrain bread, the wheat bread, and the frosted pastry. This machine only allows you 2 different pages on the main screen. And down here you can see with check marks what I have selected to be on the main screen. The problem is, if we want anything else to show up on the main screen, we have to come in here, unselect something. So for instance, if I want to get rid of the paninis, I can just do that. And then I could select something else to be in there, like pancakes, somehow. I'm not even sure how you're going to do that on this machine, but we're going to select it anyway. and maybe I'll try that in a future video. Let me know if that's something you'd like to see on this machine or not. Once you've changed it, you can save it, and that'll be back out on the main screen. The problem is, if you have more than 10 things that you want to be available out there all the time, then you're not going to be able to do that. You have to come into the screen, remove some things, and then put other things up there. It's sort of a pain in the ass, and I'm not exactly sure why they would do that. Granted, I really doubt that anybody's gonna need more than 10 options on here at all times, but you never know. There could be quite a few people that would actually do that. Maybe not the pancakes, but I could see somebody having some cinnamon swirl stuff in there, large and small bagels, some toaster strudel, so on and so forth. So really, even though this is calling it just favorite foods, that's not entirely accurate. It's actually foods that you can select out on the main screen. And if you've forgotten about that, if we close this out, you'll see that right over here now is that pancake we were talking about. But you'll also see that the other option we had there is now gone. One thing that took a little bit getting used to on this machine is that when you have a touch screen like this and you have different options, you have a tendency to want to swipe. And it kind of looks like it's swiping, but it's not actually doing that. What you have to do is when you see your 5 different options on your screen, you select that one. And the fact that it looks like I'm swiping, I'm not really swiping, because if I put my finger on this English muffin and swipe, it's just selecting it because you select these like this. It took me a little while to get that, but really it's not that big a deal, but I thought I would mention it because I thought it was a little bit funny. In fact, I don't know why they would do this on 2 different screens like this. If you were able to scroll it, then you can just put it on one screen and have all 10 options flying around there and just put them on a swipe and they would all be available. I don't really see why they'd complicate the process by doing that. For the size of this machine, it's just barely bigger than your average toaster. So you're almost 6 inches wide. I'd call that 5 7/8 wide. And this front has kind of a sloping edge, so coming up from the bottom to the top, we're looking at about 8.5 inches. And if we're going from the back of the machine down to the bottom where it's the longest, now we're looking at about 11.5 inches. So it's not a huge machine, about the same size as your average toaster, not a big deal. The finish on this machine is sort of like this brushed stainless steel finish. And if you look at this machine, it actually really is nice and pretty. I like the way it looks quite a bit. The only problem is this brushed stainless finish. You probably can't see it very well on camera, but this thing has fingerprints all over it. And I've been cleaning and wiping this thing down constantly to do this video to keep it looking as nice as possible. And wiping it down with a clean cloth really does nothing. I mean, this thing is a total fingerprint magnet, even more so than the piano black plastic that you have in your car. I'm sort of a neat freak when it comes to stuff like that, so for me, it's a really super annoying problem. One really cool thing about this machine is the fact that it will keep the time and date in here for you, even if you unplug your machine. Our Zojirushi rice cooker is the only other small appliance that we have that does that. And I'll tell you what, if you unplug your machines and move them around a lot, or if you tend to get power outages or anything like that, then you know how unbelievably annoying it is to have to set your clock over and over again. I really wish more small appliances could do that as well. By the way, if this is your first time here and you want to learn some cool new recipes, get some great cooking tips and tricks and all sorts of other kitchen related things, then start now by subscribing to the channel and clicking the notification bell so you never miss a thing. In addition to the actual toaster, you can get this warming rack, which just sits right on top of the toaster right here, and it even has its own option in the menu. You can see that it's got a croissant on here, and all you do is put your stuff right up top here, and it'll superheat this area and warm that sucker right up for you. You can do all sorts of stuff with that, and we'll show you a little bit more once we do our toasting test here in just a moment. In addition to that rack, you also have a sandwich press. And really, this just opens up just like this. Put your sandwich in there, close it up, and press it closed. And that would just go right up in here, and you would use the Panini setting on the machine. See, it even has a picture of the thing right there. Kind of looks like it doesn't fit there really good, but it actually does whenever it's in operation. You'll see that shortly too. To test the machine, we toasted a whole bunch of different stuff, used the warming rack, and also the sandwich press. We used some white bread to set a toasting baseline. We toasted a piece on the 1 setting, on the 4 setting, and on the 7 setting to show you the difference between a super light toast, a super dark toast, and a medium toast. We did that so you can see the range of darkness that you get out of this machine. You'll notice right away that it's not a perfectly uniform toast all the way across the bread. You get really close to the edges and it is a lot lighter there. The bread is still nice and crunchy out on the edges like that, but I'll admit it was a little bit disappointing that we couldn't get even color, especially when you're talking about spending close to $500 on a toaster. But that being said, it didn't really bother me all that much. Now that we have the baseline set, we're going to do all of our tests for our different breads at level 4, which would be the medium setting. We've already seen the white bread, so for our first test we did 2 slices of sourdough, and yes, we did try doing some different breads on settings that weren't specifically designed for those breads, and they came out really weird. So there definitely is a difference in the way that this machine cooks depending on which bread you've selected. Here's the results on the sourdough bread at medium setting. Not too bad. Next we moved on to the wheat bread. And here's our level 4 toasted wheat bread once we got done. Next we moved on to an English muffin, and when it came out of the machine it looked like this. Our next test was for a medium-sized bagel, and that came out pretty nice. It was a little bit lighter than I expected, but it was nice and crunchy, and the inside of it was nice and warm too. I was kind of thinking that it was going to leave part of it cold just because bagels are thicker, but it didn't. Next, we did some gluten-free English muffins, and that came out of the machine kind of on fire and looking like garbage. I hate to think about what that would have looked like if we were at a higher setting than level 4. And ironically, the way it came out of the machine looks about the way gluten-free English muffins taste anyway.
You serious?
Next, we tried 2 different kinds of Pop-Tarts. First, we did some strawberry Pop-Tarts, because those are the exact ones that are on the picture on the touchscreen, and I thought it would be kind of funny to do that. Pop-Tarts came out nice and hot, and the filling was nice and gooey, so that's good. Our second set of Pop-Tarts, we used the s'mores Pop-Tarts. Those came out the same way, and I kind of expected that because why wouldn't they? In any case, they were good. So it's nice to know you can spend $500 on a toaster and it can make Pop-Tarts, like every other toaster known to mankind. The next thing we did was we tested the warming rack. Put that up on top of the machine, and I put on a chocolate croissant. I did 1 round of warming and it really didn't warm up that croissant much at all. It was maybe kind of warm to the touch. So I ran the warmer for a second cycle. And on that second try, I did a much nicer job. The inside was nice and warm, it had a little bit of crunch to the outside, and the chocolate was getting slightly melted on the top. Just because we ran that warmer for a third cycle. And this side, the inside was hot, we had a nice crunch to the outside, and if you look there closely, you can actually see that croissant sizzling a little bit. We had a nice melt on that chocolate on the top too. It kind of sucks that I had to run that cycle 3 times to get what I want, but if I were to try to heat that up in an oven or something, just the amount of time that it takes to get the oven ready to do that, I probably would have eaten 5 of these already. So the thing I didn't like about the warming function is that you should be able to customize how long it runs. So maybe Revolution can adjust that in software or something. It just seems like a real missed opportunity. Our last test, we used the Panini Press, or sandwich press actually. The first thing you'll notice is that the press isn't very wide at all. In fact, if you had that press closed, you'd barely be able to fit 1 slice of unpressed bread in there all by itself. But we soldiered on anyway. So we got our bread ready, put a little bit of butter on the outside, threw a little bit of ham, cheese, and tomato in there, put it all together, loaded that into the sandwich press, and then we had to squish that thing closed and lock it. Next, we went ahead and put that in the machine, set the toaster for panini, and ran the cycle. Like the warmer, it didn't quite get it done the way I wanted it to. The cheese wasn't very melted, the bread wasn't very crispy, and all around that was just a little bit disappointing. So I went ahead and just ran a second cycle, and that time it got the cheese melted and everything hot, and the bread got nice and crunchy. At that point I was pretty happy with it, and in retrospect I probably should have ran a third cycle on it just to get the bread a little bit darker, but 2 cycles was okay and it worked out fine. Like the warmer function, you can't set the amount of time that it stays in the machine. Again, that would have been really welcome if you can customize that time just so you wouldn't have to run multiple cycles, because just like with the warmer, it just feels really weird and janky that you have to run the cycle over and over again to get the results that you want. Both the warmer and the sandwich press did do a good job, but I had to push that button repeatedly. If I didn't have to do that, I'd be a little bit more positive on the machine. That being said, I still think this machine is super cool. At the end of the day, the Revolution R270 Smart Toaster is pretty good. It's very expensive, so maybe pretty good might not be good enough for you. But I'll tell you what, if there's anything on the market that has cool factor, that's definitely one of them. I can tell you confidently that as far as I'm concerned, I don't regret that purchase at all. If you'd like a little bit more information about the Revolution R270 Smart Toaster, we do have an Amazon affiliate link to it down in the description of the video. If you buy anything through those links, we do make a small commission, but it doesn't change the price that you pay 1 cent. If you like this video, you might like this video right here where we reviewed the Ninja Foodi Flip Toaster. That's a pretty good toaster. It flips up out of the way so it clears a lot of your counter space, and it ain't that expensive. Well, that's it for now. I hope to see you back again here really soon, and until that time, I'm Joe, and I hope you have a phenomenal day. Take it easy.